capturing images of bees buzzing inside a hive.
Here at True Essence Foods, it's our goal to revolutionize the way food is made and consumed.
Eating healthier.
Recovery Force is a wearable technology. It causes blood flow or enhanced circulation to patients, whether to reduce pain or reduce risks of blood clots.
This call may be monitored and recorded for quality assurance.
Enter Authentics, built from healthcare for healthcare.
Living healthier. Common denominator, Indiana visionaries, entrepreneurs who leaned on Elevate Ventures to help move their high-tech platforms to market.
Indiana's been known as the crossroads of America since 1937. And now is our opportunity to be known across the globe as something even bigger, to be known as the innovation capital of the world.
Toph Day. Yes, he'll explain how he got the name here in just a minute. The CEO of Elevate Ventures, Toph's journey from growing up on an Indiana farm with no TV, rides to church on a horse and buggy, to one of Indiana's most influential entrepreneurs. Meet job creator and high-tech Hoosier visionary, Toph Day, on this edition of the Business and Beyond podcast. Voice sound a little different to you? I'm Fabian Rodriguez, a key behind-the-scenes driver each week in pushing out the Business and Beyond podcast with Gary Dick, presented by PNC. I'm borrowing the mic from Gary to roll out the red carpet for our guest this week, Toph Day. He grew up on a small farm about 100 miles north of Indianapolis. His family, a member of the German Baptist Brethren Church, a conservative community, shunned TV, and got around on horse and buggy, Amish wheels as Toph describes it. He went on to graduate from Purdue, co-founded 8 different businesses, and now leads Elevate Ventures, the most active capital firm in the Great Lakes region. Gary, now with more on this Hoosier-born entrepreneur and job creator.
And I am pleased to be joined on the podcast this week by Christopher Day. Toph, how are you?
Doing well, Gary. Thanks for having me.
Oh, great to catch up with you. And, I mentioned Toph. So you go, people who know you go by Toph, right? Not Christopher. When did that start?
That started in college. So in high school playing basketball, if people wanted the ball, it would take way too long to say Christopher, right? And so they called me Day, my last name, right? And then in college, people started to say Chris, and I wouldn't pass them the ball. And they'd be like, why aren't you passing me the ball? I'm like, because I don't know who Chris is. And so then they decided to make it Toph. So that's how it started, and that's how it stuck.
I love it. Well, you are heading up a very important organization in our state, Elevate Ventures, as CEO of that organization, an organization that has had and continues to have really tremendous impact in the tech space, the entrepreneurial space. For those who don't know what Elevate Ventures is all about, give us a quick thumbnail.
Yeah, absolutely. So Elevate is the number one most active venture capital, early in seed stage venture capital firm in the Great Lakes region, and that's per the Pittsburgh League tables. Number 24 in the United States. We invest cross-sector. We do both venture capital and venture development. We invest in the ideation, pre-seed, seed, and Series A stages. Check sizes of $20,000 to $2 million in any one given round, up to $4 million in any given company. And we've invested in over 520 companies since the inception of Elevate, over 130 exits, and about 368 active portfolio companies today. The Portco payroll total is about $261 million, and that's driving about $17 million in revenue through payroll tax and sales tax back to the state of Indiana each year.
Obviously, those are real numbers. Those are real impacts that Elevate is making. You mentioned the check size, $20,000 to a couple $1 million. Talk about, some of the examples of the impact these investments are having in Indiana.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, one of our portcos, for example, is a company called Authentics, and they're making great waves in the healthcare space. There's another investment that we have in a company called True Essence, and they're reimagining what flavors taste like. It's a really incredible technology. I mean, we're investing in companies that literally are changing people's lives. I heard a story the other day There's a company we invested in called RF Health, used to be called Recovery Force. And they have an incredible technology that is now going in market. And so imagine if you're in a hospital laying in bed, you have to keep that blood recirculating. And they have a technology. I actually tested it out myself. And if anybody's been in a hospital bed before, I've been in one before, and it's kind of a very sterile, stark, kind of cold environment. And I put this thing on my leg to recirculate blood to test how it felt. And I immediately felt like it was like a heat blanket on me, like warm and cozy. I felt cuddly. And so I heard from another friend, his father was in the hospital and they pulled over this Recovery Force, technology and put it on his father. And it was just a really wonderful kind of full circle moment, right? Where a technology that we've invested in is where people in real life actually use that technology and say how it's improved the life of their family.
Yeah. I remember Recovery Force being out. They were at Launch Fishers, right?
Yes. Yep.
And so they're still out there. They're doing some things, which is very positive and an example, I think, too, of the kind of innovation and entrepreneurship happening in Indiana every day in lots of corners of the state of Indiana that people probably aren't aware of.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And what I think is so exciting about the future is the true cross-sector and disparate stakeholder nature of what's required to bring innovation to market today. Like some other things that a lot of people aren't aware of. Indiana is the number one largest exporter of pharmaceuticals in the nation. Warsaw, Indiana contributes nearly 50% of the $50 billion orthopedic GDP in the United States. And so we have incredible horsepower in this state cross-sector. So not only SaaS companies or software, but you think about advanced manufacturing, hard tech, the pharmaceuticals, life sciences, engineering talent that we produce. We really are among the number one top 5 in all of these types of categories of other stakeholders across the globe that we have those assets right here in Indiana.
I want to talk about your entrepreneurial background because it is substantial, but you hit on something that I think is germane to the conversation. You are visibly very passionate about Indiana and what we have to offer here as a state. And Hoosiers, Midwesterners don't brag much on themselves, but I think that's kind of at the heart of the fact that you believe that right here in Indiana, the heart of flyover country, if you will, Indiana can be a leading tech center. Why do you believe that?
Well, I believe that for multiple reasons. So I believe that Indiana absolutely can and will be the innovation capital of the world. I believe that with every bone in my body. I believe that because if you think about what it takes to be the best place to work, live, and play, there's kind of 7 really critical ingredients required. And that's infrastructure, talent, mission critical industry, technology, lifestyle, cost of living, and regulatory environment. And when we look across all of those required 7 ingredients, we have collectively more number 1 and top 5, top 10 rankings than I can find of any other state in the country. And there's a phenomenon that's occurring right now globally, and it's called the productivity boom. And I kind of deduce that down to it's all about the proximity of industries with one another and cost structure. And economists believe that the epicenter of this productivity boom will be in the middle quarter of the United States because of those 2 reasons. And if that's all true, which I believe it is, then there's no doubt that Indiana is best positioned to take advantage of that. I would just mention like a couple of examples of that is President Chung at Purdue. He talks about the hard tech corridor that's coming about. And so Purdue, with the Skywater announcement, will be an anchor on one end and then a 63-mile stretch with Indianapolis on the other end. And in the middle, there's the LEAP in Lebanon, Indiana, where Lilly's made a big investment, like a $2 billion investment. And so if you look at what Purdue plans to do with other stakeholders in the hard tech corridor, they're talking about a med tech corridor up in northern Indiana with between Warsaw and Fort Wayne. When we see all these various stakeholders coming together to make things happen, you just don't see that in other states.
Mm-hmm. There's an event that you have on the books, and I think it really gets to the heart of what you're talking about, that belief that Indiana can be a leader in technology and entrepreneurship and innovation. It's called Rally, and it's going to be this August, and it is a big deal. Give us your thumbnail description of what this event in August will be.
Yes, Rally will become the world's largest cross-sector innovation conference. And I think in a couple of years, maybe 3 years, we'll even call it the world's largest cross-sector innovation festival. So Rally is all about creative collisions, bringing disparate stakeholders and people together cross-sector to truly be able to innovate faster. So in year one, we're expecting at least 5,000 innovators / attendees. We're going to have a $5 million pitch competition across 5 sectors. In the first year, those sectors will be software, hard tech, healthcare, ag and food, and sports tech. And then we're also going to have a 6th sector called entrepreneurship. That's for things that we just can't get to in year one. We're going to have over 200 speakers, 3 keynotes, 4 featured sessions. There'll be over 50 content sessions. We're going to have about 175 companies that are in the demo arena that are showing off their innovations. We're going to have a media center in the middle with Inside Indiana Business. We're super excited about.
Yeah, looking forward to that. Yep.
Yeah. So really bringing things together in a very intentional way. We went out and hired the same event producer as South by Southwest that does their content sessions and pitch competition. And so that's the scale of what we're planning. And this is truly a collection of stakeholders coming together. So from a university standpoint, like Purdue, IU, Ball State, Notre Dame, they are all leaning in. Major corporations, right? Bex, Cook Medical Group, organizations like Agronovus, High Alpha, which is an innovation studio. All of these incredible disparate stakeholders are leaning in to bring this event to life.
Yeah, and you mentioned South by Southwest, which is a mega event in Austin, and you believe this ultimately could be kind of Indiana's South by Southwest at some point.
Yeah, I absolutely do. In fact, I think it's going to become the nation and the globe's next version of South by Southwest. I really do believe that. We are Indianapolis is ranked as the best place in the nation to host an event. We're the best at it in the entire nation. And you think about the interconnectivity of Indianapolis with the convention center, with the hotels, our sporting facilities. We're ranked number 1 best place to host an event. And we're in the epicenter of the productivity boom. So there's no place better to launch Rally than right here in Indiana and Indianapolis.
Yeah. Talk about that pitch competition, because, there are lots of pitch competitions, not many with a $5 million prize attached to it. So that's a big motivator.
Yes, it is one of the largest in the world. And so, truth be known, I came across a group called 43 North in Buffalo, New York. A really incredible group up there, economic development group. And they have a $5 million pitch competition. They've been doing it for about 7 years. And initially, they would split that $5 million over 8 winners. Over the past several years, they've been doing it over $5 million awarded to 5 winners. So it's $1 million winner for each one. And so I'm like, well, gosh, if they're doing it, then we should be doing that, right? And so that's kind of how we arrived at the number of $5 million. We're like, we can't be 3 or 4. It's got to be 5.
Yeah, that's great. The other piece of this will be a lot of activity, obviously, and content, but this really does shine a spotlight on Indiana on a global stage when it comes to innovation and technology and all the different things that you talked about. Just one more thing that puts that spotlight on our state.
Yeah, that's right. I've already heard that this isn't 100% confirmed yet, but it sounds like there's going to be an Israeli delegation coming to Rally. There's another group out of England that's coming. I've even heard that there are folks in Ireland that are big into orthopedics that have interest in participating in Rally. We're also engaged in some of our major CEOs in Indiana that are doing big things with other national and global organizations that are going to be pulling in those partners and collaborators as well.
How did the idea spark? What was the initial impetus to get this Rally event put together?
So when I came into Elevate last July, we had 3 events here locally that were within a 6-week time frame, and they were all largely focused on the same thing: introducing some investors to some companies, and to some companies to some investors, which is awesome, right? We need that. We need those local and regional events. But what occurred to me quickly is that we have all of these incredible assets in Indiana, all of these incredible relationships across the nation, across the globe, and the world is changing, right? Today is the slowest rate of change that you and I will ever experience. I was laying in bed one night, and it occurred to me that the time is now. It is time for Indiana to put itself prominently on the national and global stage to tell our stories. I'm not proposing we become arrogant, but I'm proposing that we tell our stories and that we show off our innovation and the talent that we produce in the state. And so I went to our friends at the state, and it was a 3-minute pitch. Hey, we need to think bigger. Let's call it a mega event, for lack of a better term right now. It needs to be cross-sector. It needs to be about innovation. we need to go do this. And they said, yeah, let's all come together and go do it.
That's great. Well, we're looking forward to that event. It will be big indeed. And when you talk about entrepreneurship, Toph, and innovation, that's really a part of your DNA. I mean, I know the numbers, and I knew there were several companies, but you have co-founded or launched 8 businesses across a range of industries. Where did the entrepreneurial fire or spirit come from?
So I grew up on a small farm, 100-acre farm, about an hour north of Indianapolis. And we were German Baptist, which is, I always describe as like Amish with wheels. We went to church on Sundays in a buggy, horse and buggy. And, didn't have a TV growing up, et cetera.
Wow. And that's amazing. What was that like?
We played a lot of basketball. We worked and we played basketball behind the barn. Like the whole Hoosiers concept, the rim nailed to the side of the barn. Like we had that. I like to say we actually had a full court basketball court. We had one rim nailed to the barn, and then we had another post on the other end with a hoop on it. Great. But I think it was a insatiable like curiosity appetite that was built up over time. And I was never one for I never really liked authority too much. I'm like, I want to live life in the front row seat. And so, we would get on these school buses and we would travel to places like Conner Prairie, and I would see these things that looked like pyramids. And I'm like, gosh, who works in there? What are those people doing? What's life like there? I used to buy these socks that were kind of gray and blue and in what's Pittsburgh, orange and black. And because all my kids had those socks with stripes on them, or all my friends. And I knew that there was something called the Cowboys, something called the Steelers, football players, but I didn't really understand the concept of the NFL. I didn't have a TV, et cetera. And so I think it was just this insane curiosity that built up in me. And then when I was 15 years old, my second job, my first job was detasseling corn. My second job was putting trash in a dumpster on a construction site. And the guy I worked for had a Bronco and a bag phone. And I thought, I want to do what that guy does someday. And I thought he owned his own commercial construction company. I understood years later that he was the commercial developer that self-performed his construction. But I'm like, I want to be that guy. And his name was Jim Cochran Builders and Apartments up at Purdue on campus up there. And that was probably at 15. That's when it clicked for me that I wanted to have my own business someday doing something. And I thought that was it. Yeah,
that's a great story. What is it about growing up on a farm? Because you mentioned detasseling corn and the jobs that you had over time. Had that conversation with David Becker, First Internet Bank founder, and he had some similar farm experiences. And he talked about talking to Ross Perot one time many years ago, and talking about the value of work and work ethic and all those types of things that are kind of intrinsic to growing up on a farm.
I've talked to people over the years. I remember even being on the farm growing up and people thinking like, well, you have it so easy. All you do is you put some seeds in the ground and then you go pull them out of the ground. And I'm like, there's all the things that have to happen every single day in between. And so farming involves a lot of planning and a lot of maintenance, right? Preparing for the big event, right? Twice a year. And so maybe that's part of it, right? That there's not high margins involved. So you have to be very efficient, very thoughtful. You have to plan your activities out. You have to time the market when you're going to try to sell your crops or whatever it may be, whether it's livestock or crops. And so there's a lot of moving parts that go into running a successful farm. And with the cost of equipment today, like what a combine today costs probably over $1 million now. Yeah. It's at least $1 million. And I mean, back in the day, I put like an analogy, my first car I bought was $150. Well, where can you buy a car for $150 today? Like a combine, the same thing. I don't remember what they cost back then, but I do remember we bought a cab tractor. That was a big deal. We bought a cab tractor one year and a 6-bottom plow. And we were like, this is big time. Yeah. It had air conditioner in it. I mean, it was big time. And as I recall, that tractor cost us $25,000. That tractor today has to be probably $500,000.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's probably why planning. And so you have to be very efficient and rely on the family.
Yeah. To me, I've always called farmers the ultimate entrepreneurs because all of the things that you mentioned, the risk, things out of your control. There's so many things that go into being a farmer that a lot of people don't realize.
Yeah. There's macroeconomics, there's droughts, right? The rainfall. Yeah. There's so many variable factors.
Well, Toph Day knows a lot about building companies, founding companies, building companies. We're going to talk more about that and what might be next. and a lot more when the Business and Beyond podcast returns. Stay with us.
At PNC Bank, we're committed to making a difference in the lives of our customers and communities by helping them move forward financially. As a Main Street bank, we try to do right by our customers with every encounter. Our local teams offer personalized financial advice to help guide you in making the best decision. We're proud to be part of your community. PNC Bank. See how we can make a difference for you at pnc.com. Copyright 2022, the PNC Financial Services Group, Inc., all rights reserved.
Welcome back to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. My guest this week is Christopher Day, the CEO of Elevate Ventures, an organization that, Toph hit some record numbers, right? At Elevate?
Yeah. So last year was just an incredible year. We did 128 deals, invested $23 million. And we also had a big year for Indiana as a whole. I think we've had two back-to-back years from a macro standpoint of venture investing of $1.4 billion the previous year and $1 billion last year. And, I know we have some macroeconomics, impacting us now and a pending recession, but we see companies powering forward even more efficiently than ever. Yeah. And I think we expect that trend to continue. Yeah, momentum, no doubt. You mentioned that pending recession or talk certainly of a recession. Are you seeing signs out in the economy of companies, whether they're startups or otherwise, kind of making moves to prepare for that? Yeah, absolutely. We definitely, going back probably, a good 8 months ago, companies taking steps to prepare, for the things that were happening. And, I think times like this, if we look back in history, it's in times of recession or even depression when some of the greatest companies of all time were founded, right, or grew. And there's a number of folks I know that if we kind of go back to the various recessions over the last kind of 30 years, many companies that sit down and say, okay, we're not going to let this impact us. We're going to figure out how to be more efficient, how to even narrow our focus on our customer base. So what we see companies doing a lot is it's very easy as an entrepreneur to kind of call squirrel, right? You want to go after this, and that, right? And what I see happening is the CEOs really buckling down and saying, hey, who's our ideal customer profile? Let's go narrow, let's go deep. And, 50%, 30, 40, 50% growth, that's awesome. Cash flow break even, that's awesome. And I think, investors are kind of part of the problem, right? This always goes in cycles. And it's like we never learn, right? In real estate, there's the boom real estate and then everything crashes, et cetera. But I think investors sometimes put undue pressure on companies to try and grow too fast before they have product market fit, before they have process-led sales, nailed down. And so what I see is a back to the future moment, right? Back to fundamentals, block and tackle.
Yeah. Hey, Indy, I just thought you were talking about challenges, but the recent collapse at Silicon Valley Bank, which a lot of concern about a broader banking crisis that didn't really materialize. But again, referencing Dave Becker, he talked about kind of some scrambling that weekend that happened, that took place. Impact, in your view, on the Indiana?
Definitely companies were impacted. I think, with the Fed stepping up and backing the physical deposits, right, that was real cash. I think it was absolutely the right thing to do. There was some scrambling there, and a lot of banks gained a lot of customers in a short period of time.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, right.
And what I was really impressed to see is we didn't have a lot of companies in our portfolio that were impacted. There were probably less than 10 companies that were impacted, but the CEOs leapt into action quickly, and we were all in high communication, but in creating other facilities to get that, from an FDIC insurance standpoint, getting sweep accounts put in place, transferring money as necessary to protect those assets. And so everybody got through it, I think largely unscathed, but there were definitely a couple of weeks and especially 48 hours of some white knuckle moments.
Yeah. Well, certainly being an entrepreneur always involves some white knuckle moments. And Toph, you've co-founded or launched 8 businesses in a range of industries. I think Demand Jump, was that your last company?
Yes. Yeah. Demand Jump. They're still at it today. Tom Millay came in and replaced me as the CEO when I came over to Elevate. And some exciting news on that front. We just released a book. We published a book called Pillar-Based Marketing. We released that about 2 weeks ago, I think it was. And Ryan Brock, the Chief Solution Officer at Demand Jump, we started writing that book over a year ago at this point. So that just launched, which was pretty exciting news. It's become a bestseller in 3 categories already. I think the publisher told us for a niche book like what we published, they would expect kind of 250, 300 book sales in the first year. And I think we've already passed 600 at this point.
Great. Congratulations. Yeah, that's exciting. That's exciting. Think back to that first company you founded. What was that company? What do you remember about launching your first startup?
Yep. So that company was called Starcom Broadband. And so basically we were a private cable operator that would build these mini cable plants, for lack of a better term, on an apartment community, right? So multifamily and manufactured housing was our target market. And so we would go put this technology on a multifamily property. And our kind of claim to fame was we had the ability to turn on and turn off cable at an individual unit. So if the rent check didn't show up, we just get a little phone call and they'd say, flip the switch. And so cable service would go off and rent checks would show up pretty quick.
Yeah.
And so we were doing that all across the country. It was really exciting. We were also one of the first companies to figure out how to tariff dark fiber and to be able to offer symmetrical 1.5 meg internet speeds, which we all would laugh at today. But back then it was quite an accomplishment. I think we were the first ones to do that with Ameritech in the country. But then we got caught in the dot bomb. So we were executing our business. It was a highly capital intensive business. And we got caught in the dot bomb when everything fell apart. We had a $7 million term sheet that was on the table that fell apart because the VCs wanted to hold on to their capital and have dry powder for their existing investments. And so luckily with that business, we always focused on these things called contracts versus eyeballs. And back in the day, everybody was getting these massive valuations on eyeballs, like vapor. And we always made friends, with our competitors like Comcast and Time Warner, other private cable operators. And luckily we didn't have to solicit any kind of exit because I got a phone call from Comcast and they said, it's time for you to go away. And the short story is they acquired us in 10 days. But the reason they acquired us is we had signed a contract up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I think we had 67% of the population tied up under contract, and we were in the process of building out our systems. And so it just kind of goes back to, again, those fundamentals that while we weren't the cool, sexy tech company because we weren't focused on eyeballs, we were kind of old school in that transition of the .com days. We were focused on contracts. I heard from someone at Goldman Sachs during that time frame that our cash on cash return in that era was like the 3rd highest of any of the companies that Goldman represented.
Wow.
Yeah, kind of a cool stat.
That's impressive. Yeah. What are some of the other, any of the startups you were involved with, any crazy stories, funny stories you remember about getting things going? And I'm sure there are a lot.
There's so many. I mean, Gary, we were young and naive, and anybody that would talk to us that we thought would write us a check, we were jumping on a plane. Man, we would jump on a plane. We would be there tomorrow, right? And we didn't know that most of these people are just wanting to suck information out of you, et cetera. And so, like, once we found ourselves, we were pretty sure we were meeting with somebody from the mob in New York. And we're like, where do you get your money from? He's like, from these families in Chicago. And we're like, I think we're up. We're done with time now, we think, right? We met with this other group that was going to help us raise money. And we walk into their office and something was weird. Like, long story short, there were still the price tags on the bottom of this guy's shoes that were totally brand new. The receptionist had only been hired for like 2 hours, the only time slot that we were there to meet with them. And like, there's like, just this, it was like a staging, like the office had been staged. We're pretty sure the entire thing was a scam, and he was trying to get us to write him a $25,000 check. If you do it today, it's only $25,000, right? If you wait, it's going to be $50,000. For me to represent you. We smelled that quickly. Yeah. It's insane. The stories go on.
Yeah. When people ask you what an entrepreneur is, can you define an entrepreneur? What an entrepreneur really is all about?
I think an entrepreneur, there's some weird, deep desire to serve. I think there's some innate ability of no matter what, just to put one foot in front of the other one more time. There's probably some manic characteristics, some ADHD characteristics. I actually saw a chart. I wish I could remember who just published this, but they looked at the population as a whole and then isolated entrepreneurs, and they looked at like manic and bipolar and ADD, ADHD, the percentages. Pretty interesting. Those characteristics are like at least 2 or 3x of the population. And so, I think it's people who probably not all, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are quote unquote book smart. I think a lot of entrepreneurs are more street smart, and they just, for whatever reason in their DNA, they just don't want to accept status quo, that there's always a way we can make something substantially better. And so let's try it.
Yeah. What about the culture in Indiana, the entrepreneurial culture? A lot has been talked about or said about that, and the risk taking and all that. I've always thought, if you think about Indiana, with names like Lilly and Hillenbrand and so many entrepreneurs, yet that entrepreneurial culture didn't seem to really exist. Is that changing now, or how do you sense that entrepreneurial innovation culture in Indiana?
All right, that's a great question. And I started Starcom Broadband in 1997. And so from that time period to today, I feel like I've seen this transformation happen kind of in 3 to 5 year segments. So back in 97, 2000, early 2000s, I think there was definitely still a culture of looking down upon failure.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's not that way today. And I think part of it is just the little things that people do. Like I think it was John Wexler and some other folks for 2 or 3 years, they hosted a thing called Fail Fest.
Yep.
And like, let's celebrate failure, right? Like WD-40. It's only called WD-40 because he failed 39 times, right? And so there's story after story. Instagram selling for what was it, $4 billion or whatever it was. Yeah. Instagram absolutely failed with their initial. I'm trying to remember what exactly they were trying to do, but it was a complete failure. They almost went bankrupt multiple times, and then discovered, oh my gosh, people are using this in a different way. What if we leaned into that? And so I think that we definitely have seen a shift in the recognition that failure is okay, and maybe even in some ways celebration is starting to creep in.
Yeah.
Because if you fail fast, that means you're closer to something great.
Yeah.
The other thing I see is the desire for that people are proactively seeking out to lean in and collaborate with other organizations and other stakeholders proactively. That wasn't that way.
Yeah.
15, 20 years ago.
What, Toph, looking forward, I mean, you have so much on the plate. Importantly, this rally event, which is going to be a big event, certainly. But as you look out to that next big thing for Indiana, as you sense it right now, what do you see out there?
So a couple of things. Number one, I think we're going to be on a trajectory where we can have $1 billion in assets under management. So one of our biggest exports is wealth. And so we take all the risk here in Indiana. And when our companies reach $5, $7, $8, $10 million and more, we are not reinvesting. There's no centralized pool of capital here that's big enough to reinvest in those companies and recycle more of that wealth here in Indiana. So when somebody sells for $100 million, $500 million, $1 billion, literally 90+% of that wealth is getting recycled elsewhere. So I think that we're going to start solving that in the future. I think with the really purposeful strategies of like establishing a hard tech corridor, establishing a med tech corridor, those things will raise the profile of Indiana drastically on the national and global stage. And then I see a proactive effort to start telling our stories more. And so that's maybe one of the most critical ones. And so things like Rally, that enable those stories to be told and seen in real time. I think it's kind of that third leg of the stool when we think about community, capital, and acceleration.
Well, Toph, it's been a real treat to catch up with you. Some great stories about you that some of them I didn't know, and it's been great to hear those stories. And really appreciate you taking the time, and really appreciate your leadership. And looking forward certainly to Raleigh and what things that big event might bring as well. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Gary. Enjoyed it.
All right, Christopher Day, the CEO of Elevate Ventures, my guest this week on the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. It is a weekly conversation with achievers in business, sports, entertainment, and beyond. And you can listen to all of our episodes, well over 100 episodes now, and get Indiana business news 24/7. All you have to do is go to InsideIndianaBusiness.com. I'm Gary Dick. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.